this was the part that I seriously considered not reading this again. Alright, we're back for the July book wrap, and I know in my last video, or at least I think it's going to be the last video whenever I'm doing this, I had already started talking about The Dream Hotel by Leila Leilani, and I am pleased to announce that this was a 5-star read. I loved this book. The main character, Sarah, she is such an interesting and thoughtful protagonist. She is smart, and this really shows throughout the narrative, and it's a consistent trait which I was thoroughly enjoying. I get pretty annoyed whenever we're either just told a character is really smart and then they just act really stupid, or if, like for example, in The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen, the, I guess, third act miscommunication trope is thrown due to the main character making a stupid mistake. This was a breath of fresh air, and Sarah is really someone that you can't help but root for. So, firstly, we are seeing her live her life at the retention center, which is not a prison, as they are told. And we also get to see in like flashback chapters how she ended up there, which of course really brings in the systemic racism that is still abhorrently prevalent in society. Her last name is Hussein, and she laments how her family has always had to be very respectful whenever they are stopped at like airport security, and how her father was always more careful and quiet about it, while her mother was very angry at being targeted in that way. And so she is sitting in this airport for like an hour, and they're like, yeah, we're not finding anything. And she's like, okay, well, can I go? Because her husband is driving around the parking lot waiting for her with their 2 twin children, and he has been taking care of them for like a week, so she is desperate to get back. And as they are about to stamp her to get cleared, they walk out to go do something else, and of course she gets upset about this because they are inhibiting her from leaving. And when she complains, they decide to reveal that her risk score is too high all of a sudden, and that she has to be sent to a retention center for a period of 21 days, which I'm sure you can tell is a lot longer than that. So she is humiliated and unable to even call her husband until she's actually in custody. This probationary period is due to the data that they have collected about her dreams and the potential risk of her killing her husband. And obviously, she's never even thought about murdering her husband. She loves her family, but they take things very literally in the dream world, so it sucks to suck, pretty much. Her probation easily turns into 10 months, and that's kind of where we're at with her in the present time. And so there are a lot of different factors that go into this. So she has to work to lower her risk score, and that work is for the company and a contract the company has with other companies. So she's really working for the company that's retaining her to make more money. And the retainees do make some money from this. They have to pay extra for like things like snacks and sanitary pads if they don't allow the company to track their periods. They also have to pay for communication to the outside world. They have to pay like $400 a month to even email people. They also have to pay to see their families in real life, and even then they only get 30 minutes. And then also, even then, these are considered privileges and can be revoked at any time, but it's not a prison. So in Sarah's case, her hearing keeps getting pushed back for things like administrative reasons. Like the first one, her lawyer dropped her case for whatever reason, and then the second time her files got corrupted, so they had to start from scratch again. And then I think after that she had gotten some infractions for some stupid rules, because the rules also change depending on who's watching and who's supervising and how they feel about the person and how they interact with that person. Like there's literally a scene where this woman is getting written up and she kind of flirts with the guy and he lets her off, only to come back and blame her for something else because she didn't keep accepting his advances. Because of that, she's no longer eligible for a hearing until her risk score gets lower again. And so all the while she is having to make herself pretty small, pretty invisible to lower her risk score and hopefully go home, but it is very, very hard to go home. And she is desperately missing her family. She is missing milestones with her children. She is worried about her husband having to take care of their children by himself with the help of his parents too. And not only that, but they are having to deal with the loss of her income because she can't work while she's in retainment. And then not to mention, the longer you're in retainment, the harder it is to get a job, because why were you in there for that long? He is also having to supply her with money for those basic necessities that are her privileges and are very expensive. And I'm just going to keep calling it the company. I don't remember what. I think it was Space Corp or something, SafeX. I'm just going to call it the company because I don't really feel like distinguishing it. So obviously this is a very highly technologically advanced society. They obviously are able to monitor and record people's dreams and use that as data against them. Throughout the novel, we do get to see Sarah's dreams and what's going on in them and why some stuff might be going on in them, if you catch my drift. And she actually keeps a dream journal so that whenever she does have her hearing, whenever they bring her dreams up, that she'll have kind of a backup on the actual interpretation of it, instead of, oh, I pushed my husband off this bridge in my dream. That didn't mean I wanted to kill him, which they are going to assume means she wants to kill him, which we know is stupid, but their society has made it so commonplace that it is just seen as another form of crime prevention. And, well, if you didn't want to have your dreams like that, why did you go and get the procedure done? Which the dreaming procedure is literally to give you an 8-hour rest in half the time. And her husband had already done it. And so being a new mom of 2 children who are both infants because they're twins, while also having a full-time job, she wanted to keep up with her husband. And she felt like she wasn't doing enough as a mom. And so she thought that by getting this procedure done, she would feel better because she was constantly exhausted from all of her responsibilities. You also get to see emails that are written to Sarah while she's in there from different people, and then you get to see tables and charts of what goes into her risk score, which is super questionable. There's one that's oh, she was a sexual assault victim, +3 to her risk score, which anything over 500 is bad, and that's what gets you sent to the retention center. So you being a victim could potentially push you over into that bracket. Another thing that I noticed was the constant natural disasters that's going on in this world. There is fires all the time, there's floods everywhere, there's oil getting spilled on the highways and causing huge traffic pileups. And I just thought that with how technologically advanced they are, that it's pretty interesting that they don't have the same protections against the natural climate. and instead they're letting people's houses burn down. And while we don't get like really into the nitty-gritty, there are like scary things that happen because of these disasters and how poorly they're handled in relevance to the retainees themselves. And so that was just something that I found really interesting, because where's the money in protecting the environment? Who's going to give you money to do that? The last part of this book was especially tense. Sarah is understandably very tired of working for the profit of the company retaining her, and because they only profit more by creating situations to make them stay with them longer, they've even expanded in order to take on more retainees when it takes forever to get a shower, because the lines are like 2 hours long, but you only get 5 minutes. It's terrible trying to get laundry because they had clothes that were running out all the time. They're trying to fit third cots in these small cells that have 2 people in them already. You have to piss in front of your roommate. Like, they have a stomach virus go around, and it literally put people in the hospital because of how unsanitary and awful their living conditions were. And it also really gets into the relationships that Sarah has with her family and her husband and her children, which they're her family, but I'm also talking about like growing up her family, like her mom and her brother and her dad. I loved the intricacies of this. There is a heavy emphasis on her guilt that she feels with the death of her brother, and it really brings a lot of nuance to how she feels about family and how she interacts with her father. But I don't know if the timing of how long I was talking about that showed, but I really love this book. I'm going to be looking for something else to read by Layla Leilani, because the writing was beautiful, the characters were beautiful, the setting was so cool. I ate this up. It was so good. The ending was so tense, and I don't want to tell you anything else about it because it is crazy. But now we are going to... that's sitting on my books. We are going to move on to Devil House by John Darnielle. Do you remember how excited I was to read this? I mean, look at that cover. Is that not, like, captivating? I was so excited that I just bought it because I couldn't find it at the library. And I'm unfortunately having a lot of issues with it. At first, I was kind of with it, but the farther along that I went, the more disappointed I got, until it literally pissed me off. I constantly found my mind like wandering. I could not keep myself focused on this writing. It's like dramatic prose, but for no reason. And then, not to mention, just in the middle of the book only, might I add, there is like Old English sections, and then there's also just a whole chapter that is just Old English and has no relevance to the rest of the story. This was the part that I seriously considered not reading this again, like putting it down and not touching it ever again, because I could not, I can't even read it. It's like I don't know how to read anymore because I can't. The font is terrible. And like I said, there's no relevance to the rest of the plot with this. But there's also just random chapters with the characters in the narrator who is a author's novel in the book, and it just switches in the middle of it too. Like, it switches back. It also changes like point of view randomly, and it felt like in paragraphs it would just switch like that, which was really confusing, and it was really hard to tell who was talking or what was going on. Let me read the synopsis to you really quick. Gage Chandler is descended from kings. That's what his mother always told him when he was a child. Years later, he is a true crime writer with one grisly success and a movie adaptation to his name, along with a series of subsequent, less notable efforts. But now he is being offered the chance for the big break, to move into the house where a pair of briefly notorious murders occurred, apparently the work of disaffected teens during the satanic panic of the 1980s. Chandler finds himself in Milpitas, California, a small town whose name rings a bell. His closest childhood friend lived there once upon a time. He begins his research into the murders with diligence and enthusiasm, but soon the story leads him into a puzzle he never expected. Back into his own work and what it means, back into the very core of what he does and who he is. Devil House is John Darnielle's most ambitious work yet, a book that blurs the line between fact and fiction, that combines daring floral experimentation with spellbinding tale of crime, writing, memory, and artistic obsession. So, we start with the synopsis. We are following the writer as he is buying this house, and he is telling us everything about this house. He's telling us what it used to be, and what it turned into, and what it turned into after, and what happened after that until he got it. And this is like 80 pages. Okay. I was still okay with it because I love world building. I love how the setting can really enhance the imagery in stories, but it really didn't matter all that much because the next chapter that we get is his other book referenced in this called White Witch, which is also a second cover in here, which is not as cool as this one. But we get a chapter from that, and that one is about a teacher who gets put on death row for killing 2 high schoolers that she taught because they broke into her house to steal her stuff. This had no relevance, really, to the rest of the story, which I kind of guess that it does because later in the book there's a whole chapter of a letter that he sent by the mother of one of those children because she didn't like how he portrayed their family in the book, which I was wanting the commentary, but I thought this was a horror novel, and it wasn't even thriller, it wasn't even suspense, it was literary fiction, and I like literary fiction, but if it had been marketed that way, I might have enjoyed this more, I think, because it talks about the satanic panic, and really the only thing that goes into that is these teenagers putting all these occult markings all over this house that the narrator bought where the people had gotten murdered. And by house, it is his house, but it used to be a pornography store like 20 years before. And then it was just abandoned because of the murders. But before that, it was a soda shop. But before that, it was a breakfast place. And before that, who cares? So, we get a lot of the teenagers, like one of them works in the porn store, and the porn guy that owns it decides he wants to work in phone sales, and he's not going to pay the rent anymore, and he leaves everything. And he does this so that the landlord, who is like a hard ass, will have to move all the stuff herself, especially because it's a porn store. And I mean, it's kind of gross, but essentially they just kind of use it as like their hangout spot. And one of his friends is homeless and living in there, but the whole thing about Devil House is that they don't know who killed the landlord and her prospective client who is going to buy that house. There is a portion on this chapter where I wasn't sure if it was like a typo or not, because it literally named one of the characters. Okay, so during the actual scene where we see the actual murder happen on page, it names one of the characters. But then in that same paragraph, it affiliates him with one of the other character's characteristics, because the other character is homeless, and he would be the only one to have this kind of information because he was homeless. But like I said, they named a different character when you still don't even know who it was. I was just flabbergasted. I was just so tired. It really just felt like a slog to get through, which especially sucks since I paid for it. But there is some commentary on like the true crime community and true crime creators, because the creators are making money off of victims and their stories and selling movie rights for even more money, and they are directly influencing how people see their families and basically just profiting off of people who have died in terrible ways. And it's also talking about the people consuming these, because if it actually turns out to be boring, who's going to read it? So they have to do things like infer some of the people who were in there and kind of spice it up. But the last chapter is where I was just kind of like, I was done. So in the synopsis, it mentions that his childhood friend lived in that town, right? The last chapter is that childhood friend. From his perspective. We never get to learn what his name is, and they were friends when they were 6. I think they had been friends from when they were 2 to 6. And they had kept a little communication in like letters like for a year or 2 after, and then never speak again until this chapter in their however old they are, adult age. You really think that the last chapter is supposed to be upping the climax, right? Because we're nearing the end. It literally dissolves. It's boring. And the twist, major spoiler warning, because it is, the last like 2 pages of the book. So here's a timestamp if you don't want to hear this. The twist is that the author made it all up because it was boring. Like, apparently, what actually happened where there were some crackheads in there, and he didn't even loosely base the characters on these people. He entirely fictionalized them and then said they were based on them, or entirely fictionalized people in the story that he's trying to say were real. I don't think this would have pissed me off as much if this hadn't been 400 goddamn pages. And the reason that he did that was because he felt bad from the letter that he got from Jesse's mom. It just felt like a huge waste of time. It felt like you took this book and you slapped me in the fucking face. My flabbers are gasted. What else can I say? The little things that I did actually like about this book are completely overshadowed by everything else that it did. So what I'm working on right now is The Simple Art of Killing a Woman by Patricia Mello. This is okay so far. Essentially, this is about a woman who works at a law firm, and one of their clients are writing a book on women that get murdered. And she goes to this town called Acre in Brazil and basically sits in on their trials. It's kind of hard to explain what's going on because the writing is really simple and kind of annoying. I don't know. I'm gonna gather my thoughts on this one fully once I finish, because I've only got less than 100 pages left. Yeah, there is 249 and I am on 164. So I'm going to try and finish this tonight, and I'm going to get back to you on what I actually think about this, because I have written some stuff down. I just don't have it written out to where I'm ready to talk about it on film yet. So I'll be back. I finished it. I did not have a good time with this one either. So we are on a bit of a disappointing stretch. We've taken some hits this month. I'm honestly kind of unsure on what to say about this one. It's kind of a nothing burger. I feel like it's trying to say too many things to really expand or bring anything more than like surface level, like face value, what it says on the page. There's not really any characterizations, there's not really any character development. The writing is pretty simplistic, but I'm not really sure if that's just because of the translation. But I'll just start by reading the synopsis to you. The simple art of killing a woman vividly conjures the power women can hold in the face of overwhelming male violence, the resilience of community despite state-sponsored degradation, and the potential of the jungle to save us all. To escape her newly aggressive lover, a young lawyer accepts an assignment in the Amazonian border town of Cruzeiro do Sul. There, she learns about the attacks on the region's women, which have grown so commonplace that the cases quickly fill her large notebook. What she finds in the jungle is not an epidemic of femicide, but also persistent racism, deforestation, and a deep longing for answers to her past. Through the ritual use of ayahuasca, she meets a chorus of Ikamiabas, warrior women bent on vengeance, and gradually she recovers the details of her own mother's early death. The simple art of killing a woman is a lamentation for the real-life women murdered by so many men in Brazil, a personal search for history and truth, and a modern, exacting, and sometimes fantastical take on old problems that, despite our better selves, dog us the world over. I'm sorry if I pronounced anything incorrectly. That's honestly really it. What it tells you in the synopsis, it does not really expand off of that at all. It heavily focuses on the murders of women, and I learned after reading this that at least for the poems, I think, or maybe even some of the fictionalized ones, it is based on real life women and their murders. But the one that it really goes into, the one that explored, is the murder of a 14-year-old indigenous girl named Supira. And she was brutally, violently murdered in a sexual manner. And there were 3 perpetrators, and most of like her case is the narrator and some other people trying to find evidence to get these men put into prison. But because of their wealthy class, they originally get away with it, but then the case is reopened because the narrator had caught the jury kind of meeting in the night. So it kind of goes off of that, but that's really the only like plot that really happens and is like continuous throughout the narrative. But specifically for the real life murders that are touched on in this book, I really feel like it is lacking a lot of humanity for those women. They are really reduced to their race and how they were murdered and why they were murdered. And it uses the violence of those murders, I feel, for shock value. And I just think that's really dehumanizing and weird, especially with the message that it's trying to convey. And also, between some of the chapters, there's just random poems on women that are murdered by whoever. And I'll just read one for you. He used to call her Albino Gobshite. The police suspect that Tatiana Spitzner 29, a lawyer, did not commit suicide but was thrown from a fourth-floor window by her husband, Luis Felipe Manvallier. Images from the security camera show Tatiana being beaten in their car, being chased through the garage, and being assaulted inside the lift. Neighbors heard her shouting for help. They also heard the dull thud of her body hitting the tarmac. And this is a poem. And I'm not really one for like rhyming poems, but like I don't know. It's just rubbing me the wrong way. Moving on to like the narrator herself, she is unnamed, and there's not really very many characteristics that she has, except that she's white, which is important later, and she watched her mother die, but not like physically watched, but she was there, and she heard it. Okay, my mic died, so we're gonna try this again. So, since this was the beginning, I really thought that it was kind of the baseline for the character and that there would be some growth throughout the rest of the story, and that just turned out to not happen at all. We're kind of shown to just take her at face value and take her as correct. So, I didn't really enjoy that, especially because there's also no real consequences for her character either. She is the only woman who is kind of involved in this to not get murdered. So take that how you will, considering she's a white woman in Brazil. And there's also just this racist comment about Venezuelans and Haitians just on the 9th page. And she is speaking with Amir in this section. It says, after our swim, he talked about his cases. A bunch of losers, broadly speaking, these days including quite a number of Venezuelans and Haitians. And we talked about philosophy, in which he professed a particular interest. Did you really have to say that? Because that feels kind of targeted. That feels kind of icky. And then it just never says anything about it again. And Venezuelans and Haitians are never mentioned again. So did that really need to be in there? So with Serpira's murder, it is pretty obvious who the culprits are for that, but because of their wealth and class status, they are found not guilty. But this trial is reopened since the narrator had found the jury having like a secret meeting in a hotel at night. And so with this storyline, they are essentially just trying to find concrete evidence in order to convict them. The narrator becomes friendly with Carla, who is a local prosecutor, and Carla is holding off on breaking up with her boyfriend Paulo because he should be able to take the hint. And so I'm sure with the narrator's viewpoint, you kind of know how that is going to go as well. But specifically with the indigenous community, they are fictionalized. It's not based on an actual community. The narrator is introduced to them by Marco, who is the son of one of the women in that community. That woman is specifically the one who performs this ritual, which is like a drug trip. And so the narrator, a white woman, takes part in this ritual over and over, and that is where she meets the Icamibas, the warrior women bent on vengeance. That's literally all it is. They are just naked in the forest, talking about killing men, talking about eating men, and doing just that, and talking about their electric pussies, literally. And this is where the book has takes a weirder turn, which I like weird books, but I think just with the context of what I don't like about this book, I just didn't like it. I just was not liking this one. In these sequences, they kill Supyra's murderers and eat a couple of them, but their motivations are that all men are the enemy, no matter what. So the novel just feels really unfocused. It's trying to make so many points that it's coming off as ingenuine and it's very surface level. And I couldn't really find it in myself to care about any of the characters other than the real life women who were used for shock value in this story. But nothing really challenges the narrator or changes her worldview, and she doesn't die because she's too smart to die, because she can recognize that men are violent. So it seems we are on a streak of disappointment, but I'm hoping to break that because I have started The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, but I'm only about a chapter in so far, so I am just going to come back once I have something with a little more substance to talk about. But I'm hoping, if not end this video on a light note, have a good book after having 2 bad books. I'll be back. Okay, I stayed up until like 1 a.m. to finish this book, and I have to get up at like 6:30 to go to work because it is absolutely incredible. I loved everything about this. I started reading this at work, and so it took me like 2 days to get like 60 pages in, but I really think that's because I just get the 30-minute lunches, and it's kind of hard to get immersed when you have that kind of time, and then also the environment where I'm constantly checking the time to make sure I'm not going over. Once I actually started reading it at home, I could not stop thinking about this book. Let's start off with the setting. We are in a castle, and it's currently under siege by an enemy, and it is full of people, more people than it can really hold. And they've been expecting aid and have not gotten it. So at this point, either all of their messengers have died or they are not getting any help. They are being abandoned. It has been so long that they have already eaten all of the animals but the horses. They have already harvested all of the barely grown plants because they also haven't been getting any rain to grow anything or to drink, and so they are starving per the cover. At this point, there's not a lot more to last them. And so we follow the point of view of 3 characters, and one of them is and I am sorry if I say these names weirdly or wrong. I haven't looked up a pronunciation, which is my fault, but this is just how they sounded to me when I was reading it. So we follow the point of view of 3 characters. One of them is Phosine, who is an ex-nun turned mad woman. And she has created a miracle by cleaning the water that was making everyone sick. And she has been tasked with creating food out of nothing, because if she can make one miracle, she can make another. The next character is Servan, who is a knight of the Kingsguard, and all she wants is to go into battle and save her people, but she is kind of kept on a short leash, and she's also allowed more food than the others in order to keep her strength. One of her tasks is to make sure Phosine brings this miracle about. And so the last character we have is Trela, who is an ex-noble whose father was beheaded by Servan when she was 14 or 15, and so she's basically been on her own since then. And so all she wants, other than to get the fuck out of here, is to cause Servan the same kind of agony that she had because of this betrayal. Because she and Servan had this kind of flirtation going, and I don't know how much older Servan is. That's not really brought up. And so while they are on the cusp of carving up their own dead, to eat because they've had another recent attack. They are visited by the saints. And so we have the Lady Constant, or the Constant Lady, and then we have the Absolving Saint, the Loving Saint, and the Warding Saint. And so these are basically their icons of their religion. And the Constant Lady is kind of like the leader of this group, but they are holy figures who have appeared to aid them. And they promise to keep their bellies full, but don't bring anything with them, and then don't really offer anything else. Moving off of that, I absolutely adored the writing style. I loved the tone because it just makes so much sense for the setting. Though I will say that it didn't actually differentiate the characters' voices from one another, but obviously that was not really a setback for me at all. This book also has really fun and imaginative folklore style magic and creatures, and there's a large emphasis on the nature and language of bargains, which I always think is so cool, as well as several types of creatures. And I think the best part of that is they're not super explained in great detail, they're really mysterious. I can't really say that I loved or enjoyed one woman's point of view over the others. It was so fast paced and twisty and interesting, and there's literally never a dull moment. I also found the religious aspect of this novel really interesting. There is the nunnery, whose job it seems to be is mathematics and science, which is really cool. It's highly structured and centers around bees and honey as its main imagery. And I don't want to get too much into that because I think it's fun to see how their culture of their religious views weaves throughout the narrative and aids in this world building, and how it changes the narratives of the characters. If you like sapphic, medieval, magical, horror cannibalism stories, you should really pick this one up. This is going into one of my favorite book piles, and maybe I'll do a video later about all of my favorite books, but I really enjoyed this one. And I'm honestly, if any of the author's other works are kind of similar, I'm thinking about picking them up soon. I finished it this morning. I literally cannot stop thinking about this. Moving on from that, I know that I said that I was going to read The Bog Wife this month, but my hold for A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck came through, and that one is pretty short. My Kindle said that it was going to take me a little over an hour to finish, so maybe I'll still have time to read The Bog Wife this month, but we might also have to do next month, so you will know that before the video ends. We will see how it goes, and hopefully I'll be back with an update to kind of wrap up this video. Hello, I have finished one book and I'm almost done with another one, so it is looking like we're going to be doing 7 books this month, which is weird because last July was also the most books that I read for the year, I'm pretty sure, unless it was when I read a bunch at the end of the year. But I just finished, I finished this a couple of days ago. I finished A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck, and I really like this one. Oddly enough, it did remind me a lot of I Who Have Never Known Men. Obviously, it's very different from that, but just the sort of overwhelming despair and loss of hope sort of feeling that you get at the end of Jacqueline Harpin's novel. I really got that with this one as well. This one's a short story. It's, I think, 109 pages, and it is about a man who dies of cancer and goes to hell because he is not part of the one true religion, which is not the one you're thinking of. In this version of hell, he has to find the book containing his entire life story without any grammatical errors. He can eat whatever he wants, sleep whenever he wants, they do have like a nighttime there, and basically have relationships with whoever he wants. The only caveat is that a lot of the books there are just straight nothing, like random letters, random symbols, and they're not even told like what type of autobiography it has to be. It could be told within the seconds or the minutes or from some specific person's point of view. And also, not to mention, the library is huge. Like, I think he got there with a bunch of other people too. It's not a spoiler because he literally tells you at the beginning of the book. He's been there for eons. Basically, this library contains every book that has or will ever be written. I'm gonna let that sink in for a moment on how many books that would be. Because this book is so short, just like Fever Dream, I don't really want to tell you that much more because I don't want to give it away. But I will go into some of the themes that I thought were fun and interesting in the novel. So, because they are in hell, and because our narrator was previously Mormon, he really has to grapple with his identity as a Mormon and with how long his eternity is, which he's not going to be here forever. When he finds the book, he gets to go, but obviously this is a monumentous task. And since there are other people, it is interesting to see how they're interacting as the years go by. Like, he mentions that on some of his journeys, people just disappear completely and everyone just comes back for the most part because it's lonely and scary being by yourself. He has to grapple with not being able to be with his wife in the afterlife, and it really just challenges his sense of identity because who are you going to be in 100 years, which is double the amount of years you were on Earth? And how is that going to change your perception of your earthly life? Because they're also able to recall their entire lives with perfect clarity forever because they have to know for the books. He mentions spending several lifetimes just reliving his earthly years at the beginning. But as the book goes on, he hasn't been there for what's most of his existence now. And this really makes him see his relationships a lot differently. The setting of this novel is also really kind of like backrooms, uncanny feeling because it's all very sterile and exactly the same to the exact detail. It's not comforting, obviously. They have beds that they can sleep in, they do have showers, they do get hungry, but there's no art, there's no music, there's no deviation from pretty much anything that they're having to deal with. They look at a book, it's all jumbled, they throw it out, but also with the rules, every night all the books go back to their proper place. So you have to kind of keep up with where you're at as well. And you don't start on the bottom floor either. They are on a random floor. They don't know how tall the floors are. They don't know how many floors there are. They don't know how far down they're supposed to go. They travel for literal years. But I think my favorite aspect of this book was just the essential, like, human want of connection and love and community, and how it can give life purpose and meaning as we are watching our narrator kind of lose that, and how he loses it. This is sort of the sameness that I had found with the narrator in I Who Have Never Known Men, and that's where the overwhelming sense of despair is. I am finding it a little bit hard to like rate this story though. I thought it was very, very good. It was very engaging. It was very well done and well written. I don't know if it's like 5-star though, so I think I am just gonna go ahead and give it a 4. But I really did like it, and I highly recommend it if you have like an hour or two to spare, depending on how fast you read. This only took me about an hour-ish, and I had a fantastic time. After that book, finally started The Bog Wife by Kate Chronister. This is going pretty good so far. See where I'm at? I only have this much left. I think it's a little less than 100 pages. This thing is only like 300 and something, like 319 pages. I'm having a really good time with it so far. It's really like gothic-y, ancient, like kind of cultish. And I can't even say community because it's just a family. But essentially, their family takes care of the bog, and the bog takes care of them. And they have to give the bog their patriarch when they die in order to get a bog wife, which is a woman who is born of the bog in kind of like a sexy baby type way, specifically in order to continue the cycle. It goes through the point of view of the 5 children. There's 3 girls and 2 boys, and the boys are the oldest and the youngest. We learn that this is because their father kept getting the bog wife pregnant because he wanted to have essentially a safety net in case there was something wrong with the first one, which is awful, but it was in order to keep their family line going. The premise of the story is that they undergo this ritual and nothing appears. There is no bog wife. And there's a lot of different theories that they have on why this happened, and there's also a lot of different ways that each person thinks they can fix it, for the most part. Like, we have Charlie, who is the patriarch in line. He had a tree fall on him and break his pelvis, and is really not able to perform his patriarchal duties, which is like cooking and like attending the bog and things like that. There's like certain chores that they're supposed to do and certain things they're supposed to do. Etta is the oldest, and she's basically kind of like a mother figure for her siblings because their mom had died like 10 years previously, so Etta would have been around 23. She takes care of everything. She's taking over the patriarch's duties of like the housekeep and taking care of the siblings. And then we have Nora, Wenna, and Percy. Percy is the youngest boy, and he is specifically told by his father that he needs to kill Charlie in order to help the bog survive. And so there's a lot of different things going on in here, so it's kind of hard to like have a direct timeline, especially because it's not like there's plot, but it also feels very character focused. It's kind of showing how they're all navigating this sudden change without the direction of their father and without having a patriarch having taken over. And there's also like little snippets of their bog mother, who is only made to bear children and who either was very depressed with her life's circumstances and like committed suicide, or maybe their dad killed her. Because in the story we are shown that she does not want to keep bearing children. He keeps getting her pregnant and she has to give birth over and over and over. And there's not a lot that goes on to this. It's really very small snippets, so this is really just my idea of what is happening. Like I said, I still have 100 pages, so it could tell me more. It's all gonna come to a head sometime. I'm very excited to see it. I think I will have a better way of explaining my thoughts about this book when I actually finish it, when I actually have the chance to write it down. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit before I go and finish it. It is the 29th today. I will be finishing this book before the 31st because it's both my sister's birthdays in the next 2 days. I will be right back. I really hope it's not loud in here. My dryer is going off right now and my neighbors are moving, so I'm so sorry, but I have to finish this last part of the video. I have finished The Bog Wife by Kate Chronister. this was okay. I'm very disappointed to say that, especially since I know I had like 100-ish pages left when I last left you guys, and I was so excited. I've been sitting on it for a few days, and it just kind of, it was good, but it didn't really like wow me, especially with, the bangers that I've read this month already. So I feel like it was definitely more character focused than plot, but even then, there wasn't like enough of the characters, if that made sense. Like they stayed pretty stagnant throughout the entire story, and then it also just kind of felt like caricatures in a way. And I typically love character focused stories. It just didn't go into depth with like their relationships and with their bog mom, which I thought was interesting because the bog mom is pretty important to everyone. It just didn't feel like it really did anything. This is more spoilery, but basically at the end, their bog mom just reappears and she's like, "Hey, the compact is gone," which we've known since the synopsis, because the bog wife ritual didn't work. And she's like, "Oh, the bog is changing, and you guys have to either change or die." And some of them change pretty literally, and then some of them don't change at all, and then it's over. And I mean, most of them don't know how to drive, and they don't have a car because one of them took off with the car because he was the only one who knew how to drive it. But even if they did, I mean, they don't have like a social security or a birth certificate, but I'm sure Wenna, who had been out in the world, could like help them with that. But it doesn't really go into what they're going to do now that their house is dilapidated and they have no way of getting food because their car is gone. It just kind of ends. And sometimes ambiguous endings are enjoyable. I have had books where it's just ambiguous and I love them, but in this case it just felt really flat and kind of like it cheapened the overall work, because from when I had read it the last time, it felt like it was amping up more and more, and then they have like a little conflict where nothing really happens and then it ends. Like it just fizzled out with the monologue. I really think it was the fourth act monologue really disappointed me, because all throughout the book they are focusing on their mom and what happened to their mom and what their dad did to their mom. What really happens with that? Their mom just basically disappears again. What I did like was the setting. I thought it was very vivid and it personified the bog a lot. It had beautifully constructed descriptions of like the visuals and the textures and the smells of the bog and like their house and themselves. And the writing is very melodic, and I think it fits perfectly with the tone of the characters being, so isolated and far removed from our society, basically. Other than that, I really don't have a lot to say about it. I mean, I did feel weird about how childish some of the characters were, but that is easily forgivable. They're so isolated that they have their own sort of norms and dynamics that they don't grow out of like people do whenever they move away from home. So that's not like a big deal, and that's not something I'm going to critique. Nothing much happens plot-wise. Find out some stuff, but nothing like major. There's no like huge twist, but I did give it a 3 stars. It was okay. It's a book. I am glad I read it, but I am disappointed that it didn't meet my expectations. So that's what I read in July. We did have a good month, even though we had a couple of disappointments. I have been having a pretty good streak recently, so I needed to have a couple of bad ones just to even it out a little bit. But for August, I have started Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. I am planning on reading The Bombshell, Little Women, and Jellyfish Have No Ears, and maybe An Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy. I just got that as a special edition and it is gorgeous, but I'm going to leave that as an incentive for you to watch my next video. So I'm not going to show it to you yet. But like always, we'll see how it goes and what I get to, because I do have some holds that are going to be making their way to me soon. So they might get pushed back for some of those since I've been waiting for those ones for so long at the library. But for like my next video, I have been thinking of doing like a bookshelf organization video, because I've kind of just been piling them on there. I'm trying to do like a genre shelf thing, but with the way that my bookshelf is, it's kind of hard to keep them in the same genres because they're so small, and some of them I have so many books that it's kind of weird to just put them on there. So I think I'm going to try and organize them in a different way, and then see if I can just fit more on there in like a Tetris sort of puzzle, because I technically have two bookshelves. One of them is my bookshelf, and then the other one has just like my random knickknacks and stuff that was my old bookshelf. I'll show them to you in the next video, but my mom had gotten me, those school bookshelves that are like kind of tacky painted almost, and they have like those little rods in the middle and they're pretty long. She got those out of a school dumpster for me when I was like 13. I had two of them, so I had them stacked on top of each other, but one of them started to bow and it wouldn't stay against the wall, so I had to get rid of that one. And so I put the other one on top of my dresser. But that one also has a bunch of books on there because me and my husband went to a library sale, and I just haven't had a place to put those yet. So I really need to go through those. I think I'm just going to go and do the video and have that as motivation to get this part done. Hope you like this video.